It is a new day, which means new repent review, or so they say. Let's just get on with it. I don't want to deliberate too long. There are two parts to this no faith, so hopefully we have time to get through both of them this review. Okay. It was another day in Gehenna Academy. The chaotic school had become surprisingly quiet and peaceful once the prefect team became the dominant ruling force in Gehenna. Pandemonium Society and the rest of the clubs had lost their standing and reputation. The prefect team was the only club unaffected by this. Which is funny because it seems Hina was the only one unaffected by this. So, we say prefect team, but isn't it just going to be Hina running the show? Canonically, Hina isn't really the type of person that wants commanding power, right? She wants to keep order, but she doesn't really want to be the one calling the shots unless she has to. I guess you could say it's the case here that she kind of has to do it because everyone else is clearly incapable of making rational decisions, so... Soon, almost everyone appointed them, specifically Sorosaki Hina, to be their new leader, in which she accepted without hesitation. Her charisma, outstanding leadership, and unrivaled strength had certainly helped her gain the hearts of the Gehenna students. But the biggest factor was the full aid from Shale Sensei. The fact that Sensei was on Hina's side made her new order gain momentum in Gehenna like a well-oiled engine, along with her popularity skyrocketing through the roof. How many students fell under the temptation of the faker? It's probably most of the students, except for, the three that were, maybe, not three, it was about 10 students that weren't, Makeup Work Club, Hina, Wakamo, Ibuki. I'm wondering how many students in Kivoto's overall are, on Sensei's good side, because we're saying back here, her charisma, outstanding leadership, and unrivaled strength helped her gain the hearts of the Gehenna students. In what context does this mean? Are we saying that after Sensei returned, now we're just appointing a new leader for Gehenna because Makoto's 6 feet under or something? I know she's not dead, but she may as well be. I don't know. You'd think that, given Sensei's tone in the beginning, he is fully intent on correcting everything, as in calling all the shots on who gets to lead which of the major districts. So you think, how necessary is it that all these students are approving of Hina? Because even if they don't, the Sensei's not going to have it any other way. So it's I guess it's good that she's popular. Again, I don't know why that would matter too much, but... Some students welcomed the changes and enjoyed their new peaceful lives in school to its fullest. Others stayed silent, downright depressed, as if they had lost happiness in this world. However, as history had shown time and time again, drastic change always brought drastic conflict. Pandemonium and other clubs like GRS and the Hot Springs Department protested against Hina's rule, saying it would repress Gehenna's freedom, and a rather strange reason that she was keeping Sensei's attention from everyone. Funnily enough, the latter actually brought in more students and clubs to their side than Hina's, as they only cared for Sensei's attention than the actual beliefs of their school. This caused immense trouble and property damage all around Gehenna, spreading chaos as usual in a way of both showing their defiant will and delivering a blow to Hina out of spite. However, there was one thing that the troublemakers of Gehenna had failed to realize through their stubborn heads. It's that Hina was all out of patience. Once Hina arrived at the scene, screams and destruction filled the streets as she took out every single rioters without mercy. In the past, Hina would just rough the troublemakers with minor bruises before sending them to their cells. Now she'd beat and shoot them to a bloody pulp until their halos had turned off. There was no reason for her to hold back against filthy animals. This is what I'm saying. Is it just these specific students that are troublemakers that were the ones that tormented Sensei before the prologue occurred? Or has Hina just gone full 180? And it's partially justifiable. I'm not gonna go out and say that such a drastic change from Hina isn't warranted. But again, I just feel like Hina wouldn't be that kind of person. Even at such a insane point for her, I don't think it would make sense for her to just start being needlessly violent just because of what happened in the past. I feel like Hina's rationale would have her still remain inclined to, do I put it? Like, to have some sort of like a moral standpoint in dealing with everyone, as in, she's not gonna beat them up. Like, she'll defeat them because she's stronger than all of them. But I feel like she wouldn't really take her anger out on them just because of what happened earlier. I don't know. It's really stupid. For the Gourmet Research Society, Hina shoved the barrel of her machine gun into Haruna's mouth and unloaded a barrage of lead inside her, only to then kick her bloated stomach, making her collapse as she threw up blood and bullets onto the ground. And another thing, Hina has like prosthetics now, right? Like, who did this? How bad did it get that they had to violently dismember Hina like this? Like, what kind of resistance did she put up for them to actually like mutilate her? Did the faker command them to do that? Did she pose some sort of roadblock that caused this to happen? I feel like Hina would be the type of person to verbally strongly protest against what was happening when the faker was here. However, I don't think she would have done anything that would have posed such a wall that would cause people to snap and like tear her apart. That's like, now that I'm thinking about it, that's one thing I don't really understand. Why did that event occur? Why were the few students that were on the original sensei side so inclined to just brutally maul anyone who was on his side? It's like, was it a crime to be on sensei's side? And I remember it was said, like, I don't know if it was something we read in here or if it was something someone told me, but it was like, the GDD's case, the others from GDD besides Alice, it was that there was some propaganda going on and they were also spreading that propaganda. It's just, how hypnotic was this whole scenario in which the events of this story were allowed to fall down at such a gruesome rate. I'm just gonna keep reading. I'm like a couple paragraphs in and already saying too much. As for the hot springs department, Hina stomped on Kasumi's head with her metal foot repeatedly and brutally like a jackhammer until the ground around her head caved into a hole the size of a puddle. The only thing coming out from the ground was Kasumi's own blood. Again, she wouldn't do that. Whatever. After an hour, Hina stood on top of hundreds of half-unconscious and half-groaning students that caused so much trouble, surrounded by a demolished block that resembled a battlefield. She looked down with calm and cold eyes, stepping on the badly beaten face of Pandemonium's president, Makoto, her black prosthetic leg covered in the blood of the hundreds under her. If it weren't for Sensei's rule, most of them would have been permanently disabled and wouldn't be able to function normally ever again. Or most likely, they wouldn't have been left alive. That was the one restraint Hina held on to that didn't make the pile of unconscious students a pile of corpses. They were quickly rushed to the hospital before being locked behind bars. When they woke up in their cells, they screamed at the top of their lungs in terror of Hina. The horrifying image still vivid in their heads, their eyes turning red from their own blood as the head prefect mercilessly broke their bodies. In fact, it became the norm whenever Hina had to deal with delinquents that didn't know their place, sent to the hospital first before being locked up after Hina had beaten them within an inch of their lives. So remind me, her charisma, outstanding leadership, and unrivaled strength had certainly helped her gain the hearts of the Gehenna students. Some students welcomed the changes and enjoyed their new peaceful school life to its fullest. I'm sure that there are some students who will never cross the chairman Hina or the chairwoman Hina in their lives. I'm sure that they're just trying to enjoy their high school youthful lives as students and get it over with. That makes sense. However, these actions of that president that you so apparently adore so much and highly approve of is doing all of this, and it doesn't at least slightly invoke some doubt. Like, who are these wholehearted supporters that are like, yay, we're on Hina's side, Hina can do whatever she wants because it's not like we can do anything about it, so we're just gonna accept it. No, that's not how it works. Everyone should be terrified. Gehenna should be on fire right now. If the difference in attitude from the students that were happy and those who were not weren't apparent enough, telling apart normal students from troublemakers was much simpler to distinguish. Either they were fine or they were in crutches. For better or for worse, this is not a good thing. Hina was quickly bringing change onto Gehenna's old, chaotic ways. However, Hina wasn't the only one in Gehenna who was free from the torment that many were suffering from. A delightful hum, along with the sound of light footsteps, filled the hallway to the prefect office. The warm sunlight flooding through the windows reflected the cheerful mind of the small blonde child who soon stopped in front of a finely polished, double brown wooden door, where her second most favorite person was waiting for her. Hina, Ibuki's here to help. That is not the voice I want to give Ibuki, but hopefully she doesn't have that many lines left. Ibuki opened one side of the door with a gleeful smile towards her senior, but that warm smile quickly vanished as she saw that Hina wasn't alone, someone who was not like Hina or herself, and those that Ibuki never expected to see. Ibuki? Is that really you? Iroha's confusion came from Ibuki's different attire, as she wasn't wearing the clothes she wore in Pandemonium, but instead the prefect uniform in a purple and black color scheme. What she wore above it was the same, but smaller jacket worn by Hina with the red armband with the two-letter kanji that read Public Morals. Even her yellow rubber boots were changed in favor of strapped leather boots with the matching color scheme as the rest of her outfit. The only thing Ibuki was wearing from her previous club was the visor-peaked hat, and even that was missing the Pandemonium emblem, which Ibuki took off right after she left. It was almost a direct copy straight out of Hina's own wardrobe, and from looks alone, it was like Ibuki was her sister who was always the member of the prefect club. Ibuki snapped her lips shut before addressing her former seniors. Closing her eyes, Ibuki made a mental note to herself before opening her eyes, shooting a cold glare toward the Pandemonium members. What are you doing here, Makoto? Iroha? The cold disdain from Ibuki made Makoto and Iroha flinch in pain, as if nail were hammered into their heart. It was barely over a month, yet Ibuki treated her former seniors like unfavorable strangers. They were in the same room, close enough to reach their loving junior, but the distance between Ibuki felt so far from Makoto and Iroha. Right away, tears began watering Iroha's eyes while Makoto barely held back hers. Both were conflicted from turning their heads away in shame, for not being able to be there for Ibuki when it mattered the most. But at the same time couldn't, as this was the first time Makoto and Iroha saw Ibuki face to face in weeks. They miss her so much after she left the Pandemonium Society for good. How have you been doing, Ibuki? Iroha mustered her courage to ask Ibuki herself, even though she knew that she didn't deserve it. Ibuki slammed the door shut behind her, surprising Makoto and Iroha like a gunshot. Hina, what are we supposed to do for today? Going over repairs for city blocks and the construction materials required for it. I see. And how can Ibuki help? Ibuki? Instead of answering, Ibuki didn't bother as she entered the office and walked straight towards Hina's table, all the while blatantly avoiding her former seniors, walking around them and not even facing their direction. Wait, Ibuki. Please, we didn't mean to let them hurt you. Unable to handle her one-sided neglect, Makoto and Iroha approached Ibuki in hopes of attempting to reason with her. They were holding on to hope that Ibuki would be willing to hear them out. If she did, then there was a chance that the two of them could persuade Ibuki to come back with them to Pandemonium. But their hopes were shattered the moment they saw Ibuki's face turn to disgust from their approach. Get away from her. Leaving only 3 meters apart, Hina dashed away from her seat and quickly stood between the two sides. At the same time, Hina swiftly scraped the floor with the sharp end of her metal feet, creating a straight jagged line in front of Makoto and Iroha, a clear sign of threat, forbidding them from taking another step forward. Your business here was discussing about the mass transfer request happening within Pandemonium. Yes, that's right. So, why are you trying to approach my junior? Your junior? Makoto was furious of Hina claiming it so nonchalantly, repeating her last words as if pure nonsense. To Makoto and Iroha, Ibuki was and always would be a proud member of Pandemonium. As to show that she meant business, Makoto took a step forward, right on the edge of the line. But she quickly regretted her actions as a deadly chill ran up her spine as she saw Hina look upward at her with a cold, piercing gaze. Though they were cold, her wide-open eyes held pure anger boil inside like a dormant volcano. Not only that, Hina kept tightening and loosening the grip on her hands repeatedly, triggering an instinctive warning sign inside Makoto's head before she immediately took a step back. Damn this head prefect! Makoto breathed heavily as if she was just freed from the clutches of a giant snake. Those eyes, Hina's eyes, were that of seeing someone that they wanted dead, or wanting to do something close to it. Her hands at unrest, the line on the ground she made, it was actually her daring both Makoto and Iroha to cross the line, so that she would have the perfect excuse to punish them for not listening to her warning. Like a coiled snake, Hina was eagerly waiting for them to mess up. Iroha also caught wind of Hina's intentions even before Makoto. Goosebumps rose on her skin as she didn't move an inch. After Makoto stepped back, she grabbed onto her sleeve. Case Pandemonium's president decided to change her mind on a dime. You have some nerve calling Ibuki as your own. Nerves? Me? That's rich coming from the ones who neglected her. Or even Sensei in that matter. You. Hina let out a scoff as if they were speaking pure absurdity. Makoto shot a glare at her, but knew well enough not to prove her anger by moving forward. This time, Iroha also joined in, not showing hostility like Makoto was, but visibly uncomfortable of Hina's stance over Ibuki. I don't know where you're coming from with that statement, Miss Head Prefect, but we never neglected her, or dare let any hurt come to Ibuki. That's right. There's no way we... Except for that time with the Sisterhood. All the words that were about to come out of Makoto and Iroha's mouth crawled right back into their throats at Hina's argument. Now, let's just say, for conversation's sake, how would they have forgotten that happened? Ibuki, along with, Hina and Wakamo, were heavily injured following Sensei's return, and it seems that the main catalyst for Ibuki's injuries was the Sisterhood and their confrontation with Ibuki. So, pray tell, how did these two forget that happened? Because clearly they were acting like they didn't do anything, and they clearly didn't. They probably did not help Ibuki when the Sisterhood was ganging up on her. Well, for now, let's just read this flashback and see what ended up happening. Maybe it's their fault. Maybe they were scared of the Sisterhood doing something to them, but I'm just saying, Makoto and Iroha are not the kind of people who would just let anything even come close to Ibuki. I'm sure they would lay down their lives for this child, so I'm not sure how we can pin the blame on them if they weren't there, or if they were there, how they let this transpire. If they became heavily injured trying to protect Ibuki, I'm sure Hina would have no problem with them. As much as she has beef with Makoto, the fact that she tried to protect Ibuki, who was very strongly on Sensei's side, would be more than enough to curry favor from Hina, as everyone else is clearly doing fuck all. But somehow they didn't, or if they weren't there, then I would say if Ibuki, tried to go independently so that her being with Pandemonium students as her bodyguards might have caused some tension if she was walking into Trinity for propaganda reasons, trying to stand up for Sensei or whatever. In that case, you can't fully pin the blame on Makoto and Iroha, because what other choice did they have? If Ibuki wants to do something, they're gonna let her. But if they had the choice to help her and didn't, I don't believe that. I don't believe for a second they would do that. That's all I'm saying. That's why this scene doesn't really make much sense to me. What happened that caused Makoto and Iroha to clearly, according to Hina and Ibuki herself, have the opportunity to come to her aid and rescue, but chose not to? If they couldn't, as in, they didn't, because they would never use the excuse we don't want to stir trouble with Trinity, so we're not going to go help Ibuki. That would never happen. Like they would sooner, cause another fucking century-long war just to protect Ibuki. So let's keep going. Ibuki failed to maintain her silent disregard of the mention of the sisterhood. She covered her mouth with her hand as if she was about to hurl, breathing heavily as the painful memories replayed inside her head. Ibuki was sent to the detention room in one of the sisterhood's churches after she was caught distributing handmade flyers in Trinity about how Sensei was falsely accused of the fake news from Veritas and Kronos. At first, it was only Mari to try and reason with her, but when Ibuki proved to be more stubborn than she thought, Hinata and Sakurako were called for assistance, which led to them surrounding Ibuki as she was forcibly seated to a wooden chair. May I ask why you, Miss Tonga Ibuki, a Gehenna student from Pandemonium, is spreading these flyers on our academy grounds? Sakurako asked Ibuki as she held a childishly written flyer made by her. On it was written why Sensei was a good person and Ibuki's pure childlike reasons of why she didn't think Sensei did the horrible things that were all over the news. Like Sensei bought a lot of pudding for her, or how he spent his busy time giving her piggyback rides and playing together, or how he taught and encouraged her dreams of becoming a teacher. Nobody was listening to what Ibuki had to say, not even Satsuki, Chiaki, Iroha, or Makoto. So Ibuki thought, if she'd go to the other schools, then someone might listen, that Sensei is a good person. I call bullshit. There's no way they wouldn't believe her. Fuck this. When I talk about how much I'm willing to believe that certain events happen in certain fanfiction, it's a matter of the setup. Was this story set up in a way that allows me to believe that these events transpired as they did? And maybe it's me sprinkling in some of my own headcanons into who Ibuki is as a character and how much Makoto and Iroha really dote on her, but it's not completely out of the question. In the canon story, it is shown that Makoto and Makoto and Iroha are so accommodating for Ibuki. They will do pretty much anything for her sake. If she says that Sensei is a good person, I believe no matter what the faker Sensei does, no matter what propaganda is spreading throughout all of Kivodos, they would choose to believe Ibuki. Even if her reasons seem nonsensical and childish, I don't think they would have the guts to call her out for lying or just being a child. I'm inclined to believe that intrinsically Makoto and Iroha and maybe the rest of Pandemonium, if not half of this damn academy, Gehenna, believe that Ibuki, in her childlike innocence and ignorance, does know a lot more than they do. And, that's like philosophical. Children know more than adults because they're innocent or they're more blunt, honest, whatever. Like that's not really what I'm trying to get into. Mostly, they love Ibuki so much. This fucking faker sensei who is just fucking, I don't know, he's hot maybe? I don't know. Whatever he does, it's not going to amount to how much they love Ibuki. And, Sakurako. Such nonsense. You're causing people trouble by spreading misinformation. And frankly, the sisterhood doesn't find it very comfortable that you're siding with a child abuser. Her jaws agape, Ibuki's lips trembled in sorrow as Sakurako ripped her hard-work flyer right in front of her face. Ibuki wanted to run over and take back her flyer to try taping it back together. How many flyers does she have? I mean, maybe if she hand drew all, I assume she did. If she hand drew all of them individually, yeah, maybe each one is somewhat precious to her because she put a lot of manual labor into it. And, she's a child. It's fine. This part's fine. But just as she tried to stand up, Hinata forcibly pushed her back into her chair, almost toppling it and Ibuki to the carpeted floor. This is another thing I don't understand. Why is everyone so aggressive in this damn story? Like, that's so out of character. She would never do that to anyone for any reason. Hinata's not that kind of person. It's like not sensei. The faker made everyone just so much more aggressive. That's the part of the story that makes no sense. Everyone is just fucking ripping each other's limbs off. Why? Why? And why? It's like some people like. I said this once before. Neru might be the type of person to do any of this. Hinata, no, not in a million years. Mari. I don't even know how Hinata sounds. The worst part. How am I gonna give Hinata a voice? I don't know what she sounds like. Sensei is spending night and day working, going all around Kivodos to help others, while that man is neglecting his Fuck you, Hinata! Fuck! Shut up! I can't do this! Fuck, dude. Oh, this is the problem. Like, Ibuki and Alice being on Sensei's side makes complete sense. And that's the one thing I like about this fic. At least they're on Sensei's side. Now explain the other 99% of the students. And what about the Rabbit Squad? Okay, if Arius was on Sensei's side, what about the Rabbit Squad? Where are they? Maybe we haven't got to them yet, and maybe they're on his good side. But they weren't torn apart limb from limb, so clearly they are not on his good side. Because everyone who is on Sensei's side is torn apart limb from limb, hospitalized for 20 years until he comes back. In the prologue, why? Why did that happen? What did they do? I'm sure they weren't going around beating students up for siding with the faker, so why did they receive that treatment? He's not behind bars only because of Sensei's mercy. Sensei is the one who loves us for who we really are. Not like that man who only pretended to love us. Man, why are all these dudes so sexually frustrated? OOC, fuck it, OOC. The story, alternate universe, non-canon, OOC. Yeah, of course it's non-canon, no shit. You know what this story needs? I think if Repent had a prequel, like not spin-off, but like a prequel follow-up, written now. It needs to be written now. That details all of these events of the original Sensei, our protagonists rejecting the advances of these students, the faker coming to Kivodos, him seducing all the students, and the specifics of why all of these students decide that a little sexual gratification from the faker goes beyond all the emotional bonding they went through with the original Sensei. If I don't have that 1 million word manuscript, I do not believe any of the events in this story for a damn second. And you might be saying, like I just excused earlier, stories can go OOC, a little non-canon, a little bit divergent details from the original. And that's correct. However, the point of a fan fiction is to explore the characters we know and understand in different scenarios through different lenses. Not 180 all of them in a way that makes me question if this is a Blue Archive fanfiction at all, or just some gore, torture, porn, sex story disguised in Blue Archive masks by just copy pasting all the names with characters, students that we know. Because frankly, these characters really only retain like 30% of their characteristic, which is that 30% is really only relegated to the other characters they know. I can tell this is a Blue Archive story because all of the characters are talking with other characters from their own schools and not just random name generator like Shizuko talking to Miyu. However, just because of that, it's not enough to say that this is a valid Blue Archive fanfiction, at least in my eyes. Again, this is all my perspective, so I'm not objectively correct on anything that I've said. It's just my personal thoughts. That said, that alone does not justify this to be a proper fan fiction. And I know it's likely that the author has some kind of personal gripe with the Blue Archive sphere and maybe the community and some of the extreme parts of it. I understand that, it gets out of hand quite often. And justifying this work as a criticism of those extreme parts of the community is fine. Like, I'm not bashing this story for its extremity. Like, as much as I am not on board with this type of premise, I'm going through this fanfic because I'm willing to hear it out. This is a story that's quite unlike many. I know there's a couple that are in this genre, but many fanfics try to explore lighter parts of this story, like, wholesome character interactions, maybe with unique senseis or crossover senseis, the typical 5 million word fan fictions. And this is unlike all of them. This explores really negative relationships, a sort of a bad end kind of alternate scenario. That's cool. I know a lot of people don't agree with it, and like I said, I don't agree with it either, but I'm willing to see how it plays out. However, I'm also interested in that kind of scenario being developed in I don't think integritous is a word, but I am interested in a story like that in a fan fiction that has high integrity in context to its original work. If this is to be in a Blue Archive fiction that effectively criticizes the extreme parts of the community and is an exploration of those extremities being portrayed in the story, and how that would cause a lot of conflict and what it would look like in maybe a worst case scenario, then I would like to see it. I don't even know if saying then makes sense with what I just said, but just continuing off of that, I would like to see that in a fan fiction that lets me understand why everything here is happening. We kind of jump into everything going downhill so fast that I'm not willing to believe any of this. And technically speaking, I am willing to read a story where this happens, and I'm willing to believe those events occur. Me saying that these characters are acting out of character does not mean that whenever a character doesn't act exactly as they do originally, that means I don't believe them. By saying out of character, I mean, because it's a fan fiction, I initially assume these characters are as they are in canon. From there, the events of the story can change them in a way that's like, okay, they don't act like how they do originally, but that's because the story is different. That's not what happens here. I don't get to see why these characters take different routes and become so violent. Like, just because the original sensei, the protagonist, doesn't go along with these students and their, teenage romantic fantasies, and then all of a sudden some other guy comes along and enables that. First of all, were they in love with sensei, or are they just horny? Right? Like, all of a sudden this random guy shows up and they all fall in love with him. What happened to the other guy you just fell in love with? Are you just falling in love with any adult man that comes around? You didn't even love sensei at all. When we talk about sensei rejecting all of these students' advances, are all those advances coming from a place of genuine love and admiration for sensei? Or are they just looking to bang? That's my problem. How did they fall to the temptation of the other guys so quickly? Because even if it happened across the course of a year, couple years, that's barely enough time. Like 6 months and like 100 to 200 to fucking 1,000 students just all of a sudden send the original sensei? No! So it brings me to my final point. My primary concern from the first couple paragraphs of this story to now, my main concern with this story is that I don't believe that any of this is happening because I was never set up to believe that any of this should happen. And so when I made that joke earlier where I need that 1 million word document of backstory that justifies all of this, I was only half joking. It doesn't, obviously not going to be 1 million words, but to make this story effective, I want to see why all of these characters ended up like this. And if that is written even half decently, even subpar, like written in one night, no revision, I would still go, at least I know why they're like this. And I think if there was time taken to make that backstory effective, I think this story would not be too bad. I would say Repent would be that kind of story that's just 1 in 100 billion where you hate it because it portrays the worst of your fears and what you would never want to happen to these students, but because everything played out in the way it did in this story specifically, you cannot help but understand what has happened and begrudgingly accept it as a story that is one of a kind but effective. This story is not that. It is ridiculous purely by the basis that it makes assumptions that I, as a very mild enjoyer and someone who is not very deep into the lore or characters, still has no basis believing. With that said, Ibuki. That's wrong. Sensei's working all day in Chalet. Ibuki saw it. Why does everyone keep saying like Sensei is bad? Hinata let out a tired sigh, almost as if she was getting tired of hearing Ibuki talk. Sakurako and Hinata now had their turn. Now it was Mari's. Seeing Ibuki siding with Sensei somewhat made her feel discomfort. Perhaps anger. The one who neglected many students' feelings, including herself, though he wasn't particularly good looking, later proven to be a monster that preyed on little girls. Against a handsome, charming man who accepted their true feelings and worked tirelessly to make Kivotus a better place. I know I just ranted about this for maybe 10 minutes. What feelings? Those feelings were directed towards the first sensei, were they not? How quickly were they to decide that the first sensei was not worth it and to instead decide, hey, this other guy, he will sex us. Yay, let's do it. Also, we're calling the first sensei a predator when he is actively rejecting the advances of hundreds of high school students. Do we see the insane contradiction here? Anyone with half a brain in their stomach would be able to figure that out. I guess it doesn't help that apparently Veritas was the one who created all these rumors. Hey, isn't Chihiro in that group? One of probably the most level-headed students in all of Kivodos, at least that we know. Wouldn't, maybe she is literally inept, but wouldn't she notice that trying to create the scenario, I guess if Chihiro doesn't notice it, no one in Kivodos will fucking notice it. Except the ones who are apparently level-headed enough to look past the clear lies of the propaganda and realize that they loved the original sensei for a reason. And yeah, you could make the statement that just because this sensei, original one, seems so nice and accommodating to all, that doesn't mean he would never be a child predator. Sure, I'll grant that. You can't just make assumptions like he would never be one, even though it's highly unlikely that he would. You could go out and say he would. It is not impossible that he would never be one. Correct. Again, this is the same guy who apparently, for morality reasons, refuses the advances of all of his students. for morality reasons. So what kind of man who does that go out and abuse other children? Are they just all not his taste? Was the emotional bonding he had with all of them what turned him off from that? Does he only go for random strangers that he only glanced at on the street and decided to target? That's what doesn't make sense. Like, everything is not connecting. It's like trying to fit, I was gonna say a circle into a square peg, but everything fits in the square hole. Well. So, what does Mari have to say? Because of this, even though Mari was taught to forgive those who sinned, she no longer felt the former sensei as someone who she could forgive, as he was the one who betrayed her and everyone in Kivodos in the first place. Sure. Still, Mari calmed herself down. Even though sensei was unforgivable, Ibuki was a different story, reminding herself that Ibuki was just a lost lamb that needed guidance. When she was ready, Mari stood in front of Ibuki with a warm smile like she treats everyone. Why don't we share a nice little talk? But as her efforts of guiding Ibuki proved to be fruitless no matter what she said, Mari's smile gradually fell along with her patience that was holding in the negative feelings inside. Oh, why do you still care for that man? He's a criminal who's done horrible things. Can't you see everything that turned out for better after our new sensei came to Kivodos? Such a shame that there's still people oblivious of his hard work. Ibuki has something to say about that. Has anyone seen how sensei is lately? He's always super tired and not even smiling. Ibuki doesn't want to see sensei so sad every day. If that person is really so hard at work, why isn't he tired like sensei is? Did anyone see him actually working? Explain that. Ibuki began to weep from the cruel insults the three sisters said about sensei and started to lose control of her words. But she wasn't the only one who was losing control. Mari, Sakurako, and Hinata grit their teeth when Ibuki insulted their favorite sensei. They were quickly growing tired of her temper as dangerous thoughts filled their heads. Tanka-san, please watch how you address sensei. No, Ibuki only has one sensei, and that person is not Ibuki sensei. Sensei's been sad after that person started to hang out with the others. He's a bad person. Ibuki doesn't... A sharp ring echoed the room as Ibuki's head suddenly turned to the side. Her left cheek felt hot, soon sharp pain rising from it as well as tears rolling down her sore cheeks. Before Ibuki could catch her bearings, she got hit on the same cheek again, this time 3 in a row, by the same kind sister who approached her with a smile just a few minutes ago. I understand why Mari is the one doing this. For the purposes of the story, it's the most effective if you have usually the most graceful and calmest student lash out like this. Again, to me, that just makes even less sense. Like, out of anyone, Sakurako should have been the one to lose her temper, kind of like Nagisa would. It's just... Do not smack. Insult our smack. Sensei. Mari mercilessly slapped Ibuki's cheeks with a hate-filled glow in her eyes. The image of a forgiving servant of God was long gone, and instead a brutal executor who was about to punish a sinner that dared to insult their savior. Dude, this really just reminds me of like those dojins where everyone just falls from grace and just like, is that what this story is trying to parody? It's like, at that point, go write arrow fiction. Don't write these mature fan fiction and try to pass it off as normal storytelling. It's just unbelievable. At least in you know, those arrow circles, people kind of let the plot kind of be in the background. You know, either it's cinema, either it's shit, either it doesn't exist, and most people don't care whether it's any of the three. In this case, a good story is kind of necessary because that's what we're here for. We're not here for anything else. We're here for the story and the content within it. And that content is proving to be very hastily shaped and without much regard for how much sense it all makes. Maybe that was the point. That doesn't make it a good story. After the third slap, well, 1, 2, 3, 4, that was the fourth one. After the third slap, Ibuki toppled to the ground along with her chair. Shocked to her very core, Ibuki couldn't even speak and was only able to let out a sob like a helpless infant as she covered her red bruised cheek. Mari kept her silence as she stared at Ibuki helplessly crying on the floor. It wasn't because of remorse or regret. Maybe it would have been if she decided to stop at the first slap. Once she gave in to her anger, Mari could only see Ibuki as a sinner that needed to be punished some more. And unfortunately for Ibuki, the other two weren't so different. Hinata, it seems Tonga-san is in some need of special education. Understood, Sakurako. Hinata locked the door while Sakurako took out rags, duct tape, handcuffs, and other tools from a nearby cabinet that would help carry out the punishment. Ibuki wanted to run away, but her legs refused to move as if they turned to stone. She wanted to scream for help, but fear silenced her from letting out a sound other than desperate whimpers. The only thing she was able to do was drag herself backward using her hands, but even that was stopped by Mari, who stood behind her like a wall. Dear Lord, please forgive this poor lamb. Help! Makoto! Iroha! Help! The last thing Ibuki could remember was Sakurako and Hinata's shadow enveloping her. Everything else after that were short blurs between the harsh wave of violence that broke her petite body. After enduring pain that seemed like an eternity, Ibuki woke up after just 3 days, laying on one of the beds in Gehenna Hospital, bandaged up all over her body as moving just an inch made her jump in pain. Everyone in Pandemonium was there when she woke up, crying tears of joy that she regained consciousness, everyone except Ibuki herself. Ibuki ignored her beloved seniors as if they didn't exist, as in her eyes they were all dead to her. Even after Ibuki was well enough to walk and check out from the hospital, she refused to talk to anyone, no one in Gehenna, and most certainly not anyone in her club. 3 months later, Sensei returned to Kivodos along with new allies. Hearing his return, without any hesitation, Ibuki left the Pandemonium Society, leaving the desperate cries of Makoto and Aroha behind her and transferred to the Prefect Club to join Hina. After going through the worst moment inside her head, Ibuki's breathing hastened as she broke out into a cold sweat. Even though the wounds and bruises had all healed and gone, the pain and suffering received by the sisterhood was not something for someone as young as Ibuki to just forget. From every moment to every detail, the trauma still vividly lingered inside her memory, becoming scars that plagued her pure heart. Ibuki? Hina, hold Ibuki, please? Of course. Hina opened her arms as she welcomed Ibuki. Without hesitation, Ibuki ran straight into her arms and held her tight. As she grasped onto Hina's uniform, Ibuki released her pent-up tears and began crying for dear life, her whole body trembling with sorrow. Ibuki's desperate cries were muffled as she planted her face deep into Hina's chest, wanting to hide her shame, her fears, her weakness from everyone inside the room. Though, unlike Ibuki's wishes, Hina, Makoto, and Aroha were able to hear everything. The pained cries of a little girl coughing up all of her emotions from inside. Despite her uniform getting wet from tears, Hina kept holding onto Ibuki with care, comforting her as she gently patted her in the back of her head. Ibuki. That's not Makoto's voice. Ibuki. Ibuki. Seeing Ibuki's suffering made Makoto and Aroha felt like their hearts were being split into two. Upon hearing their unwelcome voices, Hina turned her head toward them and shot a glare of hateful intent. I just read the bolded line underneath, and fuck them, fuck everyone, fuck everyone in this story. You know what? Maybe the original sensei's right. Everyone just sucks, fuck. Where were you two? What were you two doing while your junior was being beaten by those nuns of sisterhood? We were... Not here. Pulling Makoto's wrist, Iroha quickly intervened before the president could talk, as if what she was about to say would only make things worse. Yeah, no shit. However, they were not the only ones who knew. Ibuki was just about done calming down, wiping the tears with her sleeve as she picked herself off from Hina's chest. Before Hina could ask if she was okay, Ibuki stared Makoto and Aroha straight in the eye as she said in an emotionless, chilling tone, "They were having fun at a hotel with their sensei." So, once more, I know this was very recent, but once more, let us assume, for the sake of conversation, that Makoto and Aroha, like apparently the other 200 million students in the city, or not just some mindless drones that are just fully focused on Sensei and his manhood, for lack of a better term, because clearly that's all they want. Let's assume they are people in their own right and have other desires, aspirations, you know. Like I said a little earlier, these two love Ibuki more than anything else in the damn world. Makoto would give up Gehenna in a heartbeat if it was between ruling Gehenna or Ibuki. Iroha, with half of the power, would just do the same, no questions asked. If making Ibuki suffer to drill in the severity of this scenario is a necessity for this story, I don't see the harm in having at least Makoto and Iroha being neutral parties that, let's allow them, for the sake of this story, to still have an eye for the fake sensei. But I believe that because of their undying love for Ibuki, they would momentarily drop all of those silly infatuations and risk themselves to protect her. If they caught even a half a rumor of what might have been happening to Ibuki and Trinity, I believe no matter what is going on, they would drop everything within a zeptoseconds notice and send, if not armies of Gehenna to tear down Trinity to bring back Ibuki, at least they themselves and maybe some small foot soldiers that follow along with them. They would throw themselves at Trinity for Ibuki's sake, get mercilessly beaten up, as clearly Ibuki did, or whatever form of torture, and also get majorly hospitalized. According to this story, the most effective way to drill in that punishment and suffering is to have Ibuki have no help and no support from anyone around her, only in hindsight having someone to turn to once everyone outs themselves as a traitor. I think for the purposes of this, we should have Makoto and Iroha, as I said, be neutral parties in the fact that they aren't like Hina or Wakamo or Alice or Ibuki in that they are siding with the original sensei, but they're still dynamic people with multiple aspirations and priorities and stuff like that. They, I believe, would sacrifice themselves for Ibuki's sake, get hospitalized with her, and even though Hina would recognize that they were never full supporters of the original sensei like her, I think at least their futile efforts to protect Ibuki would grant them a pass and just be students that are ignored. We don't have to have them majorly punished for ignoring Ibuki. What I think would be really effective is if they were pardoned for their efforts in protecting Ibuki, but because of their negligence and because of the way they treated Sensei, they shouldn't be forgiven, but because of how they try to protect Ibuki, they should be pardoned and ignored consequently. Apparently a lot of the students in Gehenna are allowed to live their normal lives. I think Makoto and Iroha in some way should be the same. I feel like even though if they're pieces of shit who wanted sex and should never be forgiven for that fact, I think they should have still come to Ibuki's aid because that is in character for them. No matter what was going on with the faker sensei, no matter how much he tried to tempt them into whatever, if they knew what was happening to Ibuki, they would have dropped everything for her. And just because I understand the point of this. It's only the select few who suffered in trying to stand up for the original sensei get a, not happy, but get a satisfactory ending, as in what happens to them once the original sensei returned in the prologue. But having literally everyone else just be someone who fell into temptation and decided to be a really violent student and fucking screw with the other sensei. That's what I don't understand the most. I feel like some students should be in a middle ground where they shouldn't be redeemed, but they shouldn't be this fully like punished for their actions. I feel like there should be some students who maybe they were hurt by sensei rejecting them, and maybe they saw some sort of charm in the faker that made them want to side with him. But why do these characters exist in a binary between suffering and nearly dying for the original sensei's sake, if not dying altogether with Arius, or just being a fucking sex monster who, if they don't get what they want, or if they even see an inch of another student not like being a zombie that follows the faker, suddenly that means gun blazing, fucking shove him in a torture room and don't let him escape for 100,000 hours. What? Why? There's only two types of characters in this story. Why don't we have a bit of a broader middle ground where, you know, some characters maybe occasionally saw moments of doubt, but then ultimately decided that sensei was worth sticking with and tried to reason with their friends, but ultimately decided it was not gonna happen. Some characters that at least didn't want to hurt the original sensei because of their past feelings, but still decided to ultimately end up with a faker. No, we have two types of characters. On one hand, we have students that, oh, a sensei doesn't like me. Oh, apparently there's propaganda going around that he's a child predator. I believe that because he doesn't like me. And it's not that he doesn't like him. They're just thinking that because he didn't want to have sex with them or something. And it's like, oh, this sensei, the original quote unquote 3 million quotes sensei doesn't want to get with me. Fuck him and everyone who cares about him, and they all should die. But this other guy, you know, he's so much more handsome and he does want to sex, so let's sex. On the other hand, we have students who don't want that and they're normal, but because of their crime of being normal, they get torn limb from limb and get hospitalized for 3 months until sensei comes back. No other type of character. There's no characters that doubt, completely neutral, try to go on one side but stick to the other, whatever side, like either try to stick with sensei but then ultimately go to the faker, or try to go with faker but then ultimately decide that sensei's a better option. Nope. Maybe those students show up later. But we've been through so many characters so far. GDD, Trinity, Gehenna. Not a single student has been shown to have any sort of neutral or double conflicting thoughts. You either get punished for being a sinner, or you either get salvation for having suffered previously. There's nothing else. God forbid high school students are unsure of themselves and reflect on their actions or reflect on their thoughts. No. You either die now or you died before, and you don't need to die anymore. Makoto and Iroha flinched as their hearts skipped a beat. It was like they were hit in the back of the head with sledgehammers as to how Ibuki could possibly know when nobody had told her. What are you saying, Ibuki? Who told you these lies? Lies. Ibuki heard you two saying it in front of her hospital room, that you were late because of it. Ibuki couldn't get up, but she was awake and heard everything around her. Their attempts at hiding the truth was foiled from the start. They never expected Ibuki was awake at the time of her arrival, let alone eavesdrop on them talking their excuses at the hospital. Hotel? While your junior was being beaten up, you two were at a hotel? However, for Makoto and Iroha, right now Ibuki was the least of their worries, as Hina was staring the two with pure disgust and anger, blood veins visibly twitching at her temples. Both her hands and prosthetic trembled with the sheer amount of strength put into them, like Hina was going to run up and strangle Makoto and Iroha at any moment. Trying to calm down her anger as best as she could, Hina barely composed herself to ask Ibuki's former seniors, all the while gritting her teeth and a part of her wishing Sensei never made that new law. Did you two know that Ibuki was in Trinity that day? Why should we tell you? Because I don't think I'll be able to hold myself back in front of human trash that's constantly running away from what they've done. Like one would freeze up when confronting a vicious predator, Iroha felt like choking as her eyes directly met with Hina's. She truly believed that Hina would do the worst if they failed to answer. Alright. Senpai? Iroha was shocked as Makoto was about to spill their secrets. She tried to stop her by grabbing Makoto's sleeve and pulling her back, but the Pandemonium president already made her decision as she firmly shook off Iroha's grip. Iroha, Ibuki already knows. The head prefect will eventually know. There's no point in hiding. It's better we speak our thoughts from our own mouths. Iroha's hand curled up into a fist, her nails digging into the palm of her hand, painting it in warm blood. She hated that Makoto of all people was right, as well as in herself for being a failure as a second in command. We didn't know. We had an argument with Ibuki that same day. When she ran off outside, we thought it'd be best to leave her alone until she cooled down and left it at that. None of us would have imagined. You think that's an excuse? Screaming with anger in front of Makoto's face, Hina grabbed her machine gun from her back and aimed it straight at the Pandemonium leader's face. All that's left to turn Makoto's face into a bloody mess was a pull of the trigger. Hina's finger laid right there, fully ready to press it. Despite the literal gun pointed at her head, Makoto stood unfazed and continued to speak her piece. Her eyes were dead inside, fully aware that there was no way to sugarcoat the vile truth of what they've done. That's the truth. Why you? Makoto's dry comment along with her deadpan face was the last straw for Hina. She decided to pull the trigger. Though just as she was about to, Ibuki quickly laid her hand on Hina's, stopping her from shooting at the last second. Ibuki? Don't bother. They're not worth the trouble. If you say so. After seeing the pained faces on Makoto and Iroha, Hina withdrew her weapon and holstered it to her back. Though Ibuki saved them from a brutal beating, Makoto and Iroha didn't feel any sort of relief. Rather, a deep sense of shame and dread coming their way, as Ibuki took a step forward, shooting a cold, uncaring glare toward her former seniors. Makoto, Iroha, yes, Ibuki, we're listening. Ibuki's cold, stern words brought the attention of her former seniors. Just like before, Ibuki didn't bother addressing them senpais, as they were no longer anyone dear to her. I know you didn't want to hurt Ibuki. No one in Pandemonium hurt Ibuki, but in a way, you did. You never listened to Ibuki when she wanted to talk about Sensei. Everyone treated Ibuki like a troubled child. But you know what hurt Ibuki the most? The sisters in Trinity that beat Ibuki up? No, it was you two. Your words hit Ibuki the most. What? Us? What could we have possibly said to hurt you? Makoto and Iroha had no clue on what they said that might have hurt Ibuki. The only thing they knew of, and tried to keep a secret, was the one with the hotel. Nevertheless, Ibuki knew something that they failed to remember. The last nail in the coffin that solidified Ibuki's departure from Pandemonium and from her seniors who she once held dear to her heart. It was the day before Ibuki was able to get up. Remember? When Makoto yelled that she'd invade Trinity at the hospital? Ibuki, we didn't mean that. Hearing the details from Ibuki, Makoto and Iroha's memories sparked back and was able to remember what Ibuki was talking about. The results were devastating. You said... Damn it all. I should have been there to stop Ibuki. I know. I should have told her not to. That man, causing trouble for everyone. What a nuisance. Once again, Ibuki's eyes watered with tears, only this time not out of trauma, but from the painful sting of betrayal from none other than her loved ones. That Ibuki should have stopped. That Ibuki should have been careful. Are you saying that Ibuki was wrong? For telling everyone to stop hating Sensei? You couldn't even understand Ibuki's feelings. Being the victim of a beating for no good reason was painful enough. But to hear your loved ones disagree with you, believing you were the cause, was another level of pain that destroyed a person to its core. Ibuki, I'm sorry. Let us make it up to you. Please give us a chance. Ibuki will make it very clear. Ibuki hates everyone in Pandemonium, so don't keep asking that you want Ibuki to come back. Ibuki is never going back. Ibuki breathed heavily after screaming her disgust to Makoto and Iroha. Pandemonium's second-in-command fell to her knees, covering her mouth with both hands as she cried in despair. The president just stood there, as if she couldn't comprehend the truth laid in front of her. That the most important piece in her life had forsaken her. Clearly not the most important piece in your life, because Sensei mattered more to you in that moment. And that's what I'm saying. Like, you're gonna call her the most important piece in your life. You better act it like it. Ibuki breathed heavily after screaming her disgust at Makoto and Iroha. Wait, I just read that. Meanwhile, Hina, who had been standing on the side watching everything unravel, admitted Ibuki was right. There was no need for her to bother. She didn't need to fire a single shot when Ibuki was able to do a much better job destroying Makoto and Iroha with her words alone. The head prefect walked to her desk and took a glance at the papers Makoto and Iroha had brought. It was about Pandemonium requesting aid to the prefect club, calming down the constant riots happening within. As much as Hina wanted to see the Pandemonium stuff implode, she couldn't risk the mental impact it would have on Ibuki, even if that seemed highly unlikely. Hina took a pen and signed the papers, not from wanting to help them, but to want them to get out of her office as soon as possible. After she was done, Hina took the papers and threw it at Makoto's chest. Here's your damn papers. Thank Ibuki that I even decided to sign that agreement. I appreciate... Shut up and get the hell out of my face. Hina was growing more impatient every passing second of seeing Makoto and Iroha in our office. The two already got what they came for, meaning they didn't have an excuse to stay. They were running out of welcome fast until Hina decided to take matters into her own hands. Instead of an answer, Makoto weakly nodded as she grabbed Iroha's hand. The last thing she wanted was to be beaten up in front of Ibuki. Let's go, Iroha. Get up. Ibuki, we're sorry. Come on, we've already embarrassed ourselves enough in front of her. Makoto supported Iroha on her shoulder as she went for the door. Just as she was about to exit, Makoto took one last regretful look at Ibuki before heading forward as she left the room. Unknown to her, once Makoto reached their vehicle parked outside the building, her stoic mask shattered. After the car doors closed and her privacy was secured, the floodgates of her eyes exploded. All the tears she held in came gushing out as Makoto cursed herself constantly what a worthless, brainless failure she was to everyone, especially to Ibuki. Iroha was left stunned to see Makoto frantically slamming her head to the seat in front of her, while crying how much she hated everything about herself, wishing that she wasn't even born. It broke Iroha's heart to see the always confident president become nothing more than a husk of her former self. Realizing they'd fallen too deep, she soon joined the chorus of regret herself. Now that her unwelcome guests had left, Hina turned to Ibuki, whose face was painted of a myriad of emotions. Despite how much she hated her former seniors, her emotions were far from being happiness or satisfaction. The former member of Pandemonium still faced the door even after Makoto and Iroha had already left. Worried about her junior, Hina carefully asked her, "Are you going to be okay? Is there anything I can do for you?" No, Ibuki's fine. Ibuki's supposed to help Hina with work, right?" Ibuki gently tapped her cheeks before shining a smile to her. However, Hina felt worried. It was obvious that Ibuki was trying to look cheerful. "Are you sure? Ibuki's not a child, you know." It was the second time, and yet Ibuki still kept her stance. This time, Hina didn't question her again. Ibuki had made her decision, and Hina was going to honor it. Taking responsibility. I like that. Alright, then can you sort the papers with these forms? On it. After glancing at the form she showed her, Ibuki rushed to grab a chair and place it next to her desk. As she sat down, Ibuki hummed cheerfully while looking through the stacks of paperwork. Together, they worked, chatted, and worked some more, spending quality time between senior and junior. Good morning, Head Prefect. Hako, Chinatsu, and Iori came in for work, yet Hina didn't even bat an eye as she sent most of the paperwork towards their direction. They went to their prepared desk and went to work. Whether they could finish the work until the end of the day didn't matter for her. Their well-being was no longer a concern for her. Either they would finish it on time, or she would make them. Luckily for them, Pandemonium and the other troublesome clubs were not much of a pain as they were before, partially thanks to Hina's brutal punishment, making the total amount of work surprisingly light. When the clock hit around 5 p.m., Hina turned to face Ibuki as she smoked with warm gratitude. Okay, Ibuki, I think that's enough for today. You go on ahead. And thanks for your help, Hina said while she gently patted her junior on the head, followed by Ibuki who responded with a gleeful smile. No problem. See you tomorrow. Oh, there's someone waiting for you at the main entrance, so make sure you meet her. Will do. Ibuki waved her hand while smiling, skipping happily towards the door where freedom awaited her outside. Hina kept waving her hand until her junior left the office entirely, in which her smile and hand waving dropped just like that. She stood up, leaving the rest of the work Ibuki had finished onto Iori. As there was no longer anyone in the room who deserved her kindness, Hina addressed the other prefect members with cold harshness. I'm leaving in an hour. Don't even think of leaving until you're done with all today's work. And if I happen to find my phone ringing from either one of you because of problems in Gehenna, I'll consider that a request that you don't wish to walk properly for an entire day. Got it? But what if it's urgent? Hina swiftly grabs hold of Iori's hair and slams her head to the desk, sending the stacked paperwork to scatter across the floor. Hina's grip on her was strong enough that Iori was stuck on the table, unable to move a single inch. I don't care. Figure it out yourselves. When do I have to keep babysitting you all? Why do I have to keep babysitting you all the time? Yes, Head Prefect. Understood, Head Prefect. Aqua and Shinatsu lowered their head and fell in line before they too became the target of Hina's anger. Soon, Hina let Iori go, the red-eyed twin-tail's cheek bruised red from the impact. Clean up your mess, Shiromi. Hina walked back to her desk as Iori weakly nodded. She picked up the scattered papers while trying to hold in her tears, gritting her teeth to not let out a single drop, regretting that she and the other prefects had played a part of turning Hina into what she was now. I talked enough about this fic in this video already. To sum it all up, I just wish there was a little more justification, and that we had a little more variety in the students we saw. Thanks for watching.